I'm not sure if you know this, but I got in a fight once when I was in sixth grade. I'm not sure if I told you the story or not, but
You tell me that
uh,
you get in a lot of fights, so
I've
that
only
part
been in
isn't.
two fights my whole life. That's it. And this is one of them.
Did this one
But
have the switchblade, or was that the other one?
the switch. Oh no, that wasn't really a fight. That was something different.
Oh, okay. All right. We won't talk about that. I thought
But
it's been
yeah.
expunged.
So I got in a fight. I was 11 years old, 12 years old, and this kid, he was a new kid in our school. He was Samoan or Tongan or something weird.
She was Brazilian or Chinese or something weird.
For some reason, he always picked on me. I don't know what it was. He would like, he would kick me in the shins in the hallway. He would like step in my shoes. He would like, punch me in the arm whenever he saw me. And it wasn't like playful. It was like he didn't like me. So he was kind of like out to get me. And it always kind of bothered me. It's like, what's wrong with this guy? What's his problem with me? Anyway, I was the vice president of the student body in sixth grade. So I was given the assignment to, run the haunted house during Halloween. And every year we would do these haunted houses in the school auditorium, and on the stage it'd be this like maze, and you'd have like, the lights and the people in costumes jumping out, scaring people. And my mom was there. She was helping out. She was like a witch, and she had like dry ice in this cauldron. And we set this maze up, and I was dressed as Freddy Krueger. So I had the hat, I had the mask, I had, the red and green sweater with the glove and the claws. It wasn't like a metal glove. It was like plastic. But those little edges on the plastic glove could still hurt somebody. You know what I mean? They were kind of sharp. But anyway, so we're doing the haunted house, and I just finished scaring some girls that had gone by, and I was getting ready to get back in position for the next scare. And it just so happens that this new kid who's been bothering me, antagonizing me, he comes through, and he instantly puts me in a headlock. He just like grabs me and puts me in a headlock and starts like, kind of like trying to choke me out or something. I'm like, what the heck? I didn't do anything to him. I didn't provoke this. And so he's trying to, headlock me for some reason. And so all of a sudden I felt my hand with the Freddy Krueger glove on it, like kind of clench up into a fist. And I just had enough, you know what I mean? So I pushed him off, and I gave him this one big, my best right hook. And I just kind of swung and hit him right in the cheekbone. And he fell off the stage, and he kind of fell into the curtains and fell off the stage. And nobody did anything. Like no teachers like got in the way. Nobody broke it up. It wasn't reported. Like nothing happened. You know what I mean? So he was upset about it. So the next day at school, he like challenged me to a fight. And it was kind of like that storybook, movie fight where, okay, we're going to fight after school. We're going to meet at 3:00, behind the hill, behind the school. And so all day that day, I was really worried. Oh crap, I had this fight I got to go to. And it was been talked about all day. And when it was time for the fight, like all these kids, like 20 to 30 kids, like they just kind of followed us behind the hill, behind the school. And when they made a little circle and they were chanting like, fight, do it, like in the movies. And I was like, this is really happening. Like I'm here and I'm going to have to fight this, this kid who wants to beat me up.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'd already kind of given that little, injury on his cheekbone from the Freddy Krueger glove. And so I got in my stance and I was ready to fight. I was ready to do this. And I said to him before the fight started, I said, let me see what I did to your face there. And he kind of like turned his face to show me the scar that I gave him. And right when he turned to show me, I went, bam, and I hit him again. So it was a cheap shot, but it worked. We fell on the ground, and I started like, punching him in the sides. And he instantly like gave up. He was like, that's it. I quit. I gave up. You win. And he like stood up and he ran away. Oh. And he later told me that it's because my knee hit him in the groin when we fell down. So he was already in pain. And so he didn't want to fight anymore. But the next day someone told about the fight. And so we got pulled into the principal's office, and we both told our side of the stories. And it was like instantly after we had like told our stories and our side of it, we instantly became friends. We were just like, now we're friends. We were fighting, but now we get along. Now we're friends. And the rest of my junior high school career, I would see him in the hallways and we would say hi. And we were kind of, not buddies, but we were friends,
Yeah.
And anyway, later on in life, when you marry, you have kids and you raise a family. I did that. He was doing that. And we became friends on Facebook when I was a part of Facebook. And I just so happened to be kind of scrolling through the Facebook feed, at work one time. And I clicked on one of his things, and it had his little image of his picture that he had for his profile pic. And he was now this like buff bodybuilder, like just huge pecs, huge biceps, just looked ripped, just huge monster of a guy. and somebody walked by and goes, "Who's that guy?" And I go, "Oh, that's the guy I beat up in 6th grade." All right, welcome back to NostalgiaCast. I'm Johnny Craddock.
And I'm Darin Lundberg.
And today we're going to talk about A Nightmare on Elm Street, directed by Wes Craven, starring Robert Englund, Heather Langenkamp, and introducing Johnny Depp. But before we do that, let's do a quick recap of our last episode. We did Explorers. We had my wife's cousin, Judd Harris, on. He's a big film fanatic like us, and he chose Explorers. But before, real quick, I have to make a correction because I made some comments that weren't accurate. My wife noticed it and she's like, "That's not true." I was like, "Oh, really?" So I misremembered something incorrectly. So anyway, what it was I was talking about the Twilight Zone movie, and it was Joe Dante who did the "It's a Good Life" segment, which is the telekinesis segment,
right?
And I remembered that Jason Preston was in it for some reason, and he wasn't the kid that had the powers,
right?
But he had a cameo in it, but he wasn't that kid. For some reason, I remembered it wrong. So I apologize for getting it wrong.
That's fine. We mentioned kind of that Twilight Zone was an anthology. I know that Dante directed one, Spielberg directed one, George Miller directed one. So it's not like, we did mention that. Funny, I didn't pick up on that. Jason Preston, again, it goes back to why didn't he have a bigger career? So I thought I didn't bother correcting because I thought, that's cool that he kind of played that part. So.
I think he would have been great in that part if he hadn't played that part.
He would have. I don't understand.
But Explorers, we all kind of thought, it was worth a remake, and I think it was a fairly innocuous movie. Didn't really offend anybody too much. But it was there. It tried. It had some good moments about it, but it wasn't overall. It wasn't what it needed to be.
Yeah, especially I caught Gremlins 2 over the weekend because it was on Peacock. That we have, and I watched that whole thing just giggling from beginning to end, and that was the problem with Explorers. It had the Joe Dante isms in it, just not all the way through. It kind of got lost on the way, and so that's where we kind of pushed back on that one. Still not a terrible movie, just I think the first half really worked, second half not so much.
Okay, well, let's get into A Nightmare on Elm Street, but before we do that, let's go ahead and watch the trailer.
The kids of Elm Street don't know it yet, but something is coming to get them.
There's something out there, isn't there?
You could just see cuts happening.
What did that, Lieutenant?
I don't know.
What the coroner got to say? He's in the jar and puking since he saw it.
They're gonna kill me for sure.
Did you do it?
There was somebody else there.
He was locked in a room with a girl who went in alive and came out in a rubber bag.
No one knows where it came from or who it will visit next.
Nancy? There's something wrong with you. You're imagining things.
Nightmare on Elm Street.
Do you believe in the boogeyman?
No.
Whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
She's the only one who can stop it. If she fails,
I'm your boyfriend now, Nancy.
no one will survive. From Wes Craven, director of The Hills Have Eyes and Last House on the Left, a new masterpiece in fantasy terror, Nightmare on Elm Street.
Okay, so A Nightmare on Elm Street, directed by Wes Craven, starring Heather Langenkamp, and introducing Johnny Depp. This was came out in 1984. Anyway, I want to quickly go over my history with it. I always really liked this movie. I liked the Freddy Krueger franchise. I thought that character was a one-of-a-kind character, and he was someone I always kind of gravitated towards. And when I was younger, and I mentioned this before in the podcast, that I really loved horror movies when I was younger. I loved being scared. I loved getting that adrenaline rush. Not so much anymore. I really haven't seen a horror movie in a long time, as far as like just the new ones that have come out. I just don't care for them. But back in the day, I watched all the horror movies, and I loved them. And Freddy Krueger was one of the ones that I loved the most. Um, I used to have nightmares myself, actually, of Freddy Krueger chasing me. And I'm not sure why I enjoyed that, but it was something that I always thought was kind of cool. That, hey, I had a nightmare last night and Freddy Krueger was trying to get me. But anyway, yeah, I saw all the movies. I saw Friday the 13th. I saw Halloween, all those movies. Hellraiser, I can think of that one for some reason. Pumpkinhead. Those movies I always really, really enjoyed. And anyway, what I wanted to say was this movie, for some reason, that character was someone that I like would dress up as Halloween, as Freddy Krueger, and I would like, I always had the costumes. I had the glove with the knives, and I just for some reason really liked that character. And the one that I really liked the most, as far as all the Freddy Krueger movies, was the third one, the Dream Warriors. And I'm not sure if it's because of the soundtrack, because maybe Dawkins wrote the song for it. I don't know, but I did like that movie. I thought that one was probably the one that was the most well done. For some reason, I liked. It just gave me a creepy vibe watching that one over all the other ones. The second one too, because it has the whole possession aspect to it. So that was also kind of creepy. But this first one, I always thought it was the scariest. And I rarely watched that one. I always watched the subsequent films for some reason. But this time around, it was kind of like, it was a non, what do you call it? It didn't evoke any emotion in me at all this time around. Like I didn't really feel anything. I wasn't scared one bit. But it was kind of fun to revisit it and to like, go, oh yeah, I remember that scene. Oh yeah, I remember that. But overall, I like this movie, but I didn't feel an attachment this time around. I didn't see it in a theater. I did see it at home. I'm not sure if I saw it on HBO or one of those cable, channels, or if I saw it, from a Blockbuster or a Hollywood video movie. I don't think Hollywood was around back then, but I know Blockbuster, I think, was. But anyway, my brother might have rented it and I might have, snuck in and watched it when I wasn't supposed to or something for the first time that I saw it. But like I said before, I mean, it's a character that it's just, he's someone that for some reason that was a really just good idea for a character. And he was just someone that I always, I just liked that character. But that's my history with it. What's your history with it?
Okay. Well, I don't really have a deep history with it. I can't remember exactly the first time I saw it. I know I didn't see it in a theater. I'm like you. I don't know if we talked before about my mom renting movies that she didn't know what they were. She just thought, oh, that'd be great. And so I don't know. Cause again, one of my first memories was her renting Friday the 13th and Lethal Weapon for me. So I know for a fact she rented that when there's a picture of a silhouette with a knife on the cover of Friday the 13th. So, it wouldn't surprise me if my mom rented that. It wouldn't also surprise me if I saw it with my grandpa, who, when I would stay out in New York, for the summer, every day we would walk down maybe 3-4 blocks to the closest video store, and we rent a couple movies because you knew that I like watching movies. And I'm pretty sure I rented a few horror movies, much to his chagrin. But again, he didn't really say anything. So, but again, like you said, Freddy Krueger has been part of my movie going experience. Like he's indelible. He's been ever since I've known of movies. I know we talked too about Jaws being the first movie that got me into movies, so horror is definitely something that I'm familiar with. But again, and you mentioning you dressing up as Freddy Krueger for Halloween, isn't that funny that you can dress up as a serial murderer and adults will look at you and go, oh, that's cute, and like not have a problem with it. But yeah, so watching it this time, I think this is probably my third time watching it. If I was to go into my history saying the first time I watched as a kid, I know I watched it early because the second time I watched it, I was familiar with everything. And I remember it being scary. And the second time I watched it, I was like, this isn't scary at all. Like I remember the second time watching it thinking the filmmaking is just not up to snuff. And I think and then watching it this time, I kind of try to fit in the middle kind of, because I didn't want to be too hard on it. I know that on the internet these days, especially around Halloween and with the new Halloween movie out, critics get a bad rep because they don't like these horror movies, and people always, but they're just critics. Critics never like horror movies. And I can go through a history of critics who actually loves certain horror movies. Like Siskel and Ebert did a full-on, like full-length review of Halloween and how good that movie was. So it's not a question of, I don't think it's much of a question of them not liking horror movies as much as, they just want to watch a good movie. Sometimes horror movies don't really fit that category.
Yes.
So, watching it for this third time, I tried to kind of fit in the middle and be honest about it. But again, I think when I first fell in love with slasher movies was with Halloween, but I'd already seen A Nightmare on Elm Street, a few of them. I'd already seen the Friday the 13th. I think I'd seen a Hellraiser. I think I'd seen, a couple of like Slumber Party Massacre, stuff like that, again, because of videos that are rented. And then when I finally got around to watching Halloween, I just wasn't interested because all these slasher movies weren't doing it for me. And I remember watching Halloween and thinking, because Halloween is very elegantly made. It's got Carpenter's Steadicam. It's got like suspense. Halloween, there's probably hardly a drop of blood in it. It relies more on suspense tricks and scaring you than it does grossing you out. And so when I watched Halloween, I was like, this is what a slasher, this is like the start of the slasher movie genre, like artful and suspenseful with quality acting and themes. And it just, watching it in retrospect, thinking, so all the Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street that came after it were just trying to copy Halloween's success. And even some of the sequels for Halloween tried to copy Halloween's success, but the Halloween sequels tried to copy the success of the copycats, which went for the full-on gore. So it's just a weird history of slasher movies. What's your, you said that these movies don't really scare you. What are your thoughts on slasher movies in general?
Well, like I said, I liked them back then. I don't anymore. Like, I don't even go out of my way to watch them anymore. I just skip right over them. So I don't have no idea what's out now or what, but I do know I liked them back then.
Yeah.
But anyway,
why is that? Why do you think that is? Why do we want to be scared?
Maybe because when I was younger, I wanted that fright. I wanted that adrenaline rush that it gives you when you get that scare, or you get that, like, what's going to happen. And then you get that jump scare, and then you get it was just intense for a young mind, I think. And so I think that's why I liked it. And again, Freddy was just a character that was like, wow, he's creepy. That was just a creepy idea for a character. And so I think that's what appealed to me, or why I was drawn to it. But I would agree with you that, it's not as good of filmmaking as it maybe should be. But I do think that they were successful in creating an atmosphere. Ooh. I think, there was the set where they in the boiler room, and all the sets were great, and just the way they shot it, I thought there was a lot of cool lighting effects. I did like whenever they use a shadow and like Freddy would pop up and you see like his silhouette in the shadow, or like the knives would pop up. I thought that created an atmosphere, and so that was what for me I kind of thought, well, that was kind of cool, that was. And then she's in the bathtub and the knives pop up out of the water. That's creepy, and that's really creepy. So I think they were successful in some things, and I think they did a pretty good job throughout. But I would say overall, it's not the greatest horror movie ever made.
Yeah, that's a note that I actually have here. I have here that the gore and the nudity is kind of tame compared to the other copycats, but at least Craven tries to give it some atmosphere. I have that exact.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's successful in doing that atmosphere. I know that it had a very limited budget. They had to go through like a lot of different production companies, tried to sell the screenplay and things like that. I think they even went through like Disney at first of all things. And Disney was like, well, we like the idea, but you're obviously going to have to cut out a lot of the violence. And so I think the budget was only like $1 million. So it's funny when you're low budget like that. One of the things I was noticing watching it is that when you're in dreams, they're not very, razzly dazzly. They're just kind of like in houses or in alleyways. And that fits. I think because we always talk about how it's more interesting to use what you have than to have like a limited budget, be imaginative with it, than to have too much budget and not be. So even though the dream sequences weren't, say, as, and again, Dreamscape, the Chuck Russell movie, who also directed Dream Warriors, came out this same year. And it's the same kind of story. It's about a guy that can go into people's dreams and kill them in their dreams. So they die in real life. And that one has, because it's Chuck Russell, obviously, it's very stylish, and it's got a lot of special effects, and it's very showy. So, just when I think of nightmares and stuff like that, I usually imagine a more showy atmosphere than just, running through an alley and ending up in front of a boiler, like flames behind you.
that's something that I want to talk about, because I do think I like the overall premise of the movie. The idea is there. It's great.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
a serial killer stalks people in their dreams, and what happens in dreams happens in real life. That's a great idea for a movie. It may not have been executed the best way, but it still was a great idea.
Well, because
And
like the other slasher movies are dull, like Friday the 13th, there's nothing. It's just the guy walking around and it's the elaborate kills, right?
yeah.
At least this time, that's an interesting idea, making some like a dream or a nightmare. That's at least a twist on that kind of same old,
Yeah.
same old.
But a problem that I found was like, they established those rules kind of quickly. Like, okay, I had a dream and he's after me, and he actually does kill Tina, and he's after the other kids and everything. But the problem is, I don't understand. Can he kill in the real world too? Because, you know, Rod dies in the real world, and it looks like Glenn does too. So I don't understand. Are they dreaming? Is this whole thing a dream, or when are they asleep? When are they awake? Those kind of things were like questions I kept asking as I was watching it. So I was like, they establish these rules, but then they break them right away.
Yeah. I think with horror movies, I don't necessarily need everything explained, because if you explain every little detail, and again, it's kind of like the backstory of Michael Myers, you know, making it like he's after his sister, that makes it significantly less scary, because if I'm not related to him, so I don't need to be scared of this guy, that kind of thing. So I don't mind that they don't explain certain things, but when you think about it, it is confusing, because if he's asleep, but it particularly shows us the blanket wrapping around his neck and pulling him up. So in reality, like that's what I mean. If Rod falls asleep, are other objects in the real world allowed to interact with him like it shows us? I mean, are we being shown like an alternate version in like reality? Does he hang himself and we only see like his nightmare of him? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's not very clear. I agree with you. They kind of say, well, he can come into your dreams, and then they don't really explain why or how he's able to manipulate stuff in the real world.
I wonder if that's why I like the other ones better, because they stick to that better. It seems like, I don't know, maybe they don't. It's been a while since I've seen them, but I remember them being, it only happens in their dreams, and then when they wake up, they have the scars to show. But anyway,
I like that they do, like, slowly it dawns on Nancy that she can, like, she burns herself and she wakes up and she's got the burn. She goes to the sleep clinic where Charles Fleischer shows up for some reason. I was like, oh, cool, there's Roger Rabbit. Anyway, right. So,
I have a question. In the sleep clinic, why do they put a little note on her chin? Like, what is that measuring? I don't know what that's.
Growth of her beard hair. I don't know. That's a good question. It's just maybe they saw it in pictures and just thought they'd copy it. Yeah. But, at the clinic, she's able to pull the hat out, and so she slowly realizes, oh, if I can pull stuff out, I can pull Freddy out and I can kill him in the real world. So I like that. I mean, again, when they actually sit down and they talk about, well, it's a man in my, dream, and he was wearing this red and green sweater and he was wearing a hat. He had knives for fingers, and it's, apart from the movie, it's kind of like you said, the concept is great, the idea is great, but the way that they execute it is not, say, as creepy as I would like it to be, I'd say. But is that a emblematic of its time, that they're not able to execute it that well?
So they didn't have the resources, maybe you say, or didn't have the technology to do it better, or what? Or
maybe Wes Craven just, I don't know, maybe he wrote the script really fast. When you think about all this stuff, I don't mean to nitpick him, but Wes Craven has never been one of my favorite directors. I know he's good and he's very iconic, and obviously he's got Scream, but a lot of times his movies, especially this one, there's a lot of amateurish stuff. Like, I don't know if you noticed, like, some of the staging is really wonky. Like when Nancy decides to go to school and then Rod grabs her, and then all of a sudden you see her dad, John Saxon, come out from, where was he? It's like, he goes, hold it right there. I was like, were you standing behind him? And then there's the part where Nancy confronts Marge, and she's holding the hat, and she gets mad at her and she throws the hat, but they're standing so close that it just kind of bumps her and then falls to the ground. I laughed at that. There's a lot of these staging things, and especially when I just noticed that the music score, because the Charles Bernstein, I think that's his name, the theme for Freddy is instantly iconic. That piano theme that they play. Yeah. But then it does stuff where it cuts to, like, during chase scenes, it cuts to like weird electronic rock music when they're being chased, and when that happens, it takes me completely out of the movie, because it's just so silly and it's not scary, because it feels very 80s.
Right. And it definitely has the water phone effect. There's this instrument where you put water in this bowl and you kind of like use a bow to hit these little nodes that are like off of it. And it gets really creepy sound. And it was used by all kinds of, horror films back in the day. So I definitely noticed that. I was like, oh, there's the water phone.
Yeah, that's interesting. So just these little bits and pieces kept taking me out of the movie. But then there were other parts that I thought were really well executed. Like if you're going to talk like comedy, I thought the part where Johnny Depp, he's over at Tina's house and he's calling his mom and he pretends to be somewhere else and he's got like the tape recorder. And all of a sudden you hear like car crashes and people screaming and he's like there's just somebody fighting outside. And the girls are laughing at him while he's doing it. I thought that was really funny and really well executed. I like the part later where the Glenn character, he's trying to stay awake in his bed and his mom comes in and he's listening to his music and he's watching TV and she's like, how can you watch TV and listen to your records at the same time? And he goes, well, I'm not really listening to the TV, I'm just watching it. And then he stops and he smirks at it and goes, Miss Nude America is going to be on in a few minutes. And his mom looks at him and she goes, well, how are you going to hear what she says? And he looks at her, why would I care what she says? I just thought like a lot of that humor was very well done compared to some of the more awkward stuff. And then obviously like the way that they frame Freddy, I think he's only in the movie for 7 minutes, but he's shot in shadow and what were some of the more effective bits? Because I know that they're there, even though like it didn't really scare me. Some of the images are like, that's effective. That actually works. What were some of the things?
Some of them, the first one I can think of is when Tina gets murdered and she's being flung around the ceiling. That always stuck with me when I was a kid. That always terrified me just to see her, screaming and yelling and she's bleeding and the boyfriend's freaking out and she's being spun around the ceiling. Yeah, that's an image that I think, and probably was something that was, how do they do that exactly? You probably know how to do that, where it's like an upside down set or something, or
it's like a gimbal. It's kind of like you see Fred Astaire when he's dancing on the ceiling during his movies. She was the house rotated and she would just stay in one place or maybe slide to a position. And the way that the camera was stuck, it looked like the room was moving, even though she was just kind of moving all around on the floor. And then even Rod, when he reaches up, he's pinned to the ceiling with his hair matted down to give it that effect. So and again, very, very effective. I think it works.
So that's a great moment in the movie.
Yeah, it's taking old school like technology, old school that they've done, and they're applying it to their horror movie. And I think that stuff is really well done.
Yeah. Another one I like is when Tina is in the body bag and she's being drugged down the hallway in the school and Nancy's following her. Another image that stuck in my mind when I was younger, because that was also pretty creepy. And you hear the boy in the class whispering as this is all going on, and she's being drugged and the trail of blood's being left behind her. That was pretty effective.
Yeah. I like the images when Nancy's sleeping and Freddy comes through the wall, like behind her, kind of like the rubber wall. I like the image of, the spoilers, obviously the mom at the end when she's being attacked and, set on fire by Freddy and the skeleton's like moving and it sinks into the bed. It sinks into the bed and then the bed covers like reappear over her body. I think that was they probably did it with like a fade, but I thought that was effective. And then when Freddy pops back up and he pulls he pops up behind Nancy in the bed and he pulls the sheets off of himself. Obviously the one of the first images we see when Freddy shows up and his arms are stretched out, which they did with strings, and they were able to hide that really well.
That was kind of corny. I'm not sure I like that. Every time I see that, I think that's kind of corny.
Why was that corny to you?
I don't know. I just think it was just weird. Like, why would he have these big, long, accordion-like arms? It just seemed kind of weird to me. But I guess that's something they did throughout the whole franchise, too.
Right. Well, how much of it could be explained away? Because I know sometimes our dreams do that stuff. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
Like a lot of the weird, wonky stuff that happens in the dreams, I could explain away. That stuff didn't bother me so much as the real life reality stuff. I don't know if that makes sense, because dreams are always just strange. I thought it was funny that Nancy ended up in the same exact spot that Tina ended up in the beginning. It's just interesting that mirror imagery, and she's able to overcome that kind of thing.
I did have a question about the dream versus the real world when Nancy's like setting up those booby traps.
Yeah,
is that the real world? Is she doing that in real life, or is that part of her dream? And why would she think that a booby trap in her dream would stop I don't know. I don't understand how that works.
Well, I had that as a note. She, she and Glenn are talking at one point, and he notices that she's reading a book about traps and things like that. So she's obviously, and that's what I like about Nancy, is she has agency and she takes charge. I don't know if it delves deep enough. Like, all her friends are being murdered, and so there's no part. I mean, it's there, but there's no hard-hitting part where she decides, and you see her decide, I'm going to take back what's been taken from me, and I'm going to get this guy that's killed all my friends. So it's ingrained in her character, but there's no moment that actually shows that off to make it powerful. But yeah, when she's setting up the house, her plan is to pull Freddy out and then to just maim him with all these things. I thought it was funny that she calls her dad, and who's across the street after Glenn's been killed. And he goes, I want you to wake me up in 20 minutes. And then what did I have? She has time. She's able to home alone the house.
Yeah.
And she's able to go and console her mom and have a conversation with her and put her to sleep. And then she's able to go fall asleep herself. And then she's able to dream. And then she's able to, all in the course of 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I was like, what is going on? So that's what I mean. Like, if that had taken place in a dream world, that would have been easy to excuse, but that is taking place in reality. And so it's like, you're bending time a little bit. If she said, wake me up in 45 minutes, that might have been better, but like 20 minutes and all the stuff she was doing in the prep.
Yeah,
and,
I noticed that too.
Yeah, and even the part with the sledgehammer was funny because it just kind of hits Freddy in the chest. He's like, oh, ow.
Well, what's funny too is like the door opens in and he's like trying to open it by pushing out.
Yeah.
And then finally he opens it in and the sledgehammer hits him.
Well, obviously he's not used to reality. I guess you could explain it that way. Any other images or parts that you thought were effective?
I think, let's talk about this. When Johnny Depp's character dies and 500 gallons of blood come shooting out of the bed. and then the paramedics come and they get a stretcher. What are they going to put on the stretcher? All this blood?
I know, like when the mom comes in and all you see is blood. Again, what I thought of that part, I've always thought that part was funny. I was like, I remember watching as a kid and all the blood came out. I was like, that's a lot of blood for one body. You know what I mean? But then I don't know if what the mom sees is what we see. Like when everybody else is in there puking, I don't know, like it might be different. Like he might be ripped to shreds and there's just pieces of him all over the room. Like we don't really see, they keep that part a secret. We see the blood coming out. And I don't think that's what everybody's reacting to. I thought it was interesting that when Depp is the radio station that he's listening to is the call sign is KRGR, which is Krueger with the vowels left out. I thought that was a nice touch.
I didn't notice that. That's cool.
Yeah.
I did notice, however, all the little red and green, like the tablecloth was red and green at the picnic table at Tina's house. And then there's like a red and green picture on her wall.
Yeah.
And then the hall pass student with the red and green sweater who's basically Freddy.
The car at the end. The
car at the end. That was kind of fun to see all the red and green.
Yeah. I liked reading the history of it. Like Wes Craven, how he came up with this is I think there was a case of people in Haiti, something like that, where like people would, like refugees would come over from war-torn parts of like Cambodia and Vietnam and stuff like that. And they would have dreams. I think there are maybe 4 or 5 people. There was a series of articles. They would have dreams that they were being chased by something and they wouldn't want to go back to sleep. And they would tell their parents that I can't go back to sleep because something's going to kill me. I will die. And they gave them sleeping pills. And these guys tried to stay awake as long as they could, but they ended up falling asleep in their beds. And then the first guy, the parents heard screams and they ran upstairs and supposedly they opened the door and he was thrashing in his bed. And before they could even get to him, he just died in his sleep and there was no cause for it. And then this happened to like 4 or 5 other people that came from kind of the same area, that they were just dying of this disease. I think they renamed it sudden unexplained death syndrome.
SIDS? Is that
SUDS, something like that. But that's where that came from. And then I think Craven was talking about there was one time he looked out his window at his house and there was an old man crossing the street that just knew he was watching him. And so he looked up and kind of smiled menacingly at him. And so that's where he got the Freddy Krueger. So there's some personal, like self-referential stuff going on in the movie that I thought was neat. Okay. It reminded me of how James Cameron came up with the Terminator. He just had a dream. He got really sick and he had a dream one night of this robot that emerged from flames. And that's where he got the idea for that last bit in his movie.
Okay.
So and again, with the colors, he read some articles about how red and green clashed, and when you're shown the human eye, those colors together, they kind of clash, and your eyes can't really handle it. And so he thought, well, that's obviously the colors I'm going to choose for Freddy's.
Well,
for Freddy's
aren't those the colors that people who are colorblind can't see?
Oh, that's interesting too.
Yeah.
Huh. So yeah, there's a lot of, you can delve really deep into a lot of this. I know they're talking about like, it's not so much like a final girl situation, so much as a youth taking control. I know that the parents are kind of, I know that the whole history of Freddy is that he was murdered by town people. Like he was murdering children around town. Originally he was a molester, but there was a case called the McMartin preschool trial that was going on at that time about this hundreds of cases of kids being abused at this preschool, being molested. And so they decided to cut the molesting part out, but it's there as like subtext, they say in the special features. It's there. What do you think?
In the information button, when you push the information on it even says a pedophile.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, oh, well, they don't really mention that he's a pedophile in the movie. It's just he's just a serial killer.
Right. It comes out later, and they never come right out and say it, but there is a part, I think, in the fifth one where they're looking at a newspaper clipping, and it does identify him as a child molester.
Oh, okay. All right.
But that's something that I think is interesting because, and again, maybe this has to do with horror movie sequels. I always think that the first movie in a horror franchise is usually the best one because that sets like the tone. And then they don't really know what to do with it. I think you're right that Dream Warriors and New Nightmare especially, they mess with the formula and they do some interesting things with it. Even the second movie, Freddy's Revenge, which is it's a gay panic movie. Like the main character is, he's afraid of this other man entering his body. And so it's very obviously a metaphor, for that kind of thing. And
I never thought of it like that.
And there's gay bars in it. And then the coach like makes him strip, and like the coach is killed nude, and he's even his butt gets slapped with a towel, like Freddy slaps. Oh. So there's all that stuff in there. But then at the end of the movie, it's a girl that saves him. So it's like, why are you setting this up? And then all of a sudden it's just a weird dichotomy in that movie, but at least it's interesting. My problem with the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, especially when you realize that he was meant to be a pedophile, and that's ingrained in the movie, even though they never come out and say it. Even if he didn't molest these kids, he's still murdering children. And they turn Freddy, especially by the fourth, even the third one, like when he picks up one of the characters and like, it's prime time, bitch, and he shoves her head into the TV, that kind of thing. He becomes a quipping, jokester. By the fourth one, especially, I think he became like the hero of the franchise. Part of the problem with these slasher movies is, and again, I'm not trying to be one of these guys that's gatekeeping stuff like that, but it's just disturbing to me that we go to see these movies to kind of cheer on the deaths of innocent people. Like we are rooting on the killer to be as brutal as possible. And I agree that Freddy made an impression, but to turn him into the quip machine hero of the franchise later on, I just think there's something really gross about that.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So like we talked about with Michael Myers, him having a history, like that part just makes him so much less mythic and less scary. Jason he has no backstory. He just runs around killing people. And then at the end, someone just kills him. I don't know. Child's Play at least became kind of comedies. Child's Play had a good first one and then kind of fell into a trap. And then I think Ronnie Yu came in and started making them funny. It had Jennifer Tilly as a character, and that was able to twist it. Halloween H2O at least had the Scream as an influence, and kind of, so I don't know. It's horror movies are just weird, especially franchises, because I think it just dilutes them the longer they go. What do you think about that?
I agree with that. I think that's a fair assessment. I would like to talk about the ending if we can, though, because I know they made alternate endings.
Okay.
So the ending is, kind of cheesy. I know people don't like the fake looking mom being pulled through the tiny window of the door.
The dummy mom, yeah.
Yeah. But I think it was still effective. It was still kind of the last jump scare that you get. Oh crap, you know what I mean? Freddy's still out there. But one of the endings is that nothing happens. She gets in the car, she waves to her mom, she drives off, the mom waves back, the kids are, it's just the little girls jumping rope. And by the way, I think that's kind of another image that was always kind of creepy, is the little kids in white jumping the jump rope.
And that rhyme especially.
And that little song also was something that was kind of scary when I was a kid. But anyway, so there was the ending where nothing happens. And then there was the ending where what was the other one? Where Freddy's driving the car. So like the mom gets taken through, but then also you see Freddy in the driver's seat, the very, very end. So, and I think there's a point that was made that if Freddy's driving the car, then that means they're all dead. Like, because in the second one, when Freddy's driving the bus, you never hear from Jesse again. You never hear from any of those characters again. So they're obviously dead. So Freddy can't be driving the car. So they didn't go with that one. But what do you think? What do you think of the ending? First of all, the original ending. What do you think of the way it ended?
When you do a horror movie, I don't necessarily agree with it, but in Paranormal Activity, the way that Oren Peli originally shot the ending was, it just shows Mika being killed by Katie, and then cops show up or whatever, and she wakes out of her daze, and the cops shoot her to death, and that was the original ending caught on camera. But Steven Spielberg, when the movie went to Paramount and he and DreamWorks, and they kind of got a hold of it, Spielberg thought that's not a strong enough ending, and so he came up with the ending of Mika running downstairs, and then you see nothing but quiet for a couple of minutes, and then he gets thrown at the camera falls on its side, and then you see the demon Katie walk in, and she lunges at the camera. I think with a horror movie, for me personally, a horror movie always has to end suggesting that it's not over, or that something will continue. I know that the Conjurings do that too. What I like about the Conjuring movies is they're just basically haunted house movies, like gore-free haunted house, but it's got the Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga characters as this sweet couple who loves each other, and it's all about them, and I love that about it. And so even though it ends, the second one especially ends with them dancing together. It's a horror movie that ends up with them dancing to I Can't Help Falling in Love. But then it cuts to real life recorded footage of the case that they were working on, and you can hear the demon stuff, the demon voice and things like that. And so that you leave the theater kind of unnerved. I think a horror movie doesn't do its job if you walk out feeling I'm safe. You kind of want to walk out feeling still that it's out there and that it can continue, and that's the purpose of a good horror movie. So I agree with the idea. I think it was Robert Shea that wanted the jump scare ending, so I agree that it needed that. I just don't like the way that it did it. First of all, the way that the mom comes out, Renee Blakely, she comes out and she goes, well, you know what? I don't think I want to be an alcoholic anymore. I just don't need it. And as soon as she says it, I'm like, wait, this is obviously not reality. That's too cheesy. And then it has they're in the car, and it's nice seeing everybody alive. But then the hood comes up and it is Freddy's colors. And you're like, oh no. And then you look and the mom's just waving at him. And then you do the silly dummy bit. So I don't know if I like any of that. But at least it shows the car driving off, and it shows the girls jumping rope singing the song. I think it would have been effective still if you did this eerie thing, and maybe the mom's still not all there, but Nancy and her friends, they're a little too happy to notice anything going on. And then as soon as the car drives off, the mom is just waving, maybe like a robot. And then you see them driving off, and you see the girls doing the jump rope, and they're doing, and that could have been unnerving. But I don't know what the perfect ending would be. Like I said, I'm not the kind that can do woulda, coulda, shouldas. And so me saying, well, maybe they could have done this, that was just kind of, I have no idea what they should have. I can only really interact with what's on there. But, ending with the dummy thing it's more of a laugh. So I'm glad that at least they cut to the shot of the girls jumping rope. At least they did that. Yeah. Yeah. So what do you think of the ending?
Well, I always liked it when I was younger. But this time around, I thought, oh, that was stupid. That was my first thought. Well, that didn't work. Yeah. So I would have I like the idea of Freddy driving the car. I think that's kind of a good way to end it, But then again, the theory is, because the mom's one that dies at the end, is that this whole thing is her dream. It's the mom who's dreaming all of this.
Interesting.
So that's something to think about too.
Well, I know Langenkamp says that, she's confused by because I think what she does is she basically says to Freddy, I'm turning your back on you. I'm not going to let you scare me anymore. I know what you are, so I know how to beat you. So big deal. You're not going to do anything. And so she's able to kind of defeat him that way. But then her confusion is, if Freddy's still alive at the end, then what she did didn't work.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's no real catharsis in that.
There's no way to get rid of him.
Yeah. And I think it's more of a sledgehammer ending as opposed to something that's a little more eerie, ending with the best jump scare ending of all time is probably Carrie. when the Amy Irving character goes to Carrie's grave or the house, and the hand reaches out and grabs her, and it's all a dream.
Yeah.
And that was expertly handled, I thought. And it's a jump scare, but it's not like, again, it's just the screaming of the kids and them driving off is fine. But that thing with the dummy being pulled in through the little window in the door was just a bit too silly.
Yeah.
But again, that it's emblematic of the whole movie. It's touches like that go through the whole movie that just kind of take me out of it. The electronic music and the silliness and the staging of some of the scenes. I like how the mom, I don't understand the point of her character. She thinks that by finally telling Nancy about what they did, that the nightmare is going to be over.
Yeah, you know what? Honestly, that wouldn't even have mattered if that was even part of the story. That whole backstory about the parents killing him, it wouldn't even mattered. It wouldn't have changed the movie at all. It wouldn't have, nothing would have been different about it.
Well, again, I love the idea. They talk about it in one of the special features. I think it maybe there's like a 7-hour documentary on the Nightmare on Elm Street set, and they talk about how it's like, well, it's about parents, and like they take vigilante justice into their own hands, and is that right? And have they been suffering? And again, that's a good idea. And you kind of see, it's interesting that Glenn is the only character in the movie whose parents are together and maybe happy.
Yeah.
And have a good relationship with them. Nancy's relationship with her mom is strange. She's closer with her dad, but he's not living at home.
Yeah.
Tina's parents. The first moment that I laughed in the movie is when you see Tina's mom come in asking how she's doing, and then the boyfriend comes in and he says, "Come back to the sack." And I'm like, oh my gosh. That one line, there is no line like that in all of Halloween that's as cheap and corny as that one line.
There were a couple of those lines.
It was all over. So I like the idea of the parents kind of being hurt by this and it kind of being a curse on the town, but there's not enough of that. They suggest it, but it's not, I don't know. Does that make sense? Like it's there, but it's not there enough.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So again, it's all these ideas that could have been fleshed out, but it's a 90-minute movie that just kind of moves like a bullet. Maybe that's why people like it.
Yeah. Well, this being Johnny Depp's first movie, what do you think about Johnny Depp? How did he do?
Obviously, he didn't have like a lot of the. I think Johnny Depp was more of a heartthrob when he first started off, before he started getting weird and trying to add different like pirates, like Captain Jack Sparrow, things like that, Benny and June. So after, there was a point where anything he did, he brought something interesting to the part he was playing. Even Donnie Brasco, there's some little touches that he brings in there that are good. So, but when he started out, he's kind of like Robert Downey Jr. He was just there as kind of the heartthrob character. Yeah. And so seeing him in this, I thought he was great. Like he was like, I know the story is like they were trying to find some. He was originally written as a jock, and
wasn't it Nicolas Cage gave him the job or
yeah, something like that. But yeah, Craven didn't know if he was going to go with him, and he asked his daughters, and the daughters were like, "You need to go with Johnny Depp." He's like, "Why?" He's like, wiry, and he's like kind of a wuss. And the daughter said, "He's beautiful though." So that's why they cast him. So like I said, he has a lot of human parts. Like when he's talking to his mom, I thought that was very charming. When he dies, I thought that was, since like, you know, he was in the moment. So he's not really called upon to do anything interesting other than to be there and be a good looking dude.
That's what I was going to say. The role's not built for him. It's just the boyfriend role. Anybody could have played it, but Johnny Depp in it makes it a little more interesting. But also, I didn't know it was Johnny Depp for the longest time. Like it wasn't until I didn't really know who he was until Benny and June. So it wasn't until then it's like, oh yeah, he's in Nightmare on Elm Street. You know what I mean? So then it was kind of fun to go back and see him in that after I already, you know.
Yeah, he has a cameo in, I think, the sixth Nightmare on Elm Street, where he shows up like doing a commercial, like a drug commercial, and Freddy comes in and kills him, and that's like an in joke to his, because he's always been very grateful. He's never had a bad thing to say about his part in Nightmare on Elm Street. Like in interviews, you always catch him talking.
Well, yeah, you're positively for the movie that got you your start.
Yeah, absolutely. Some people though don't do that, so it's nice to see him be grateful. But when he did that as a cameo, and I remember seeing that on the news, like Johnny Depp does a cameo in this new new Nightmare on Elm Street movie, and I thought, because he showed up in the first one, and I remember that being he was in the first Nightmare on Elm Street. Yeah. So that was, and so I think that's what caused me to go back and watch it maybe a second time just to see him. All
right. Well, is there anything else that we want to talk about, or do you think we covered it all?
Well, I like like I said, maybe the end credit song. I started first of all, the opening credits, why does it do the picture in picture, like smaller within frame within a
Yeah, I wondered
frame.
that too. Yeah, that was
And
weird.
the credits was like, is this this looks like a made for video, like a straight to video quality, like when it started. And then
Mhm.
when it shows Nightmare on Elm Street, it comes up. Okay, well, there's the cinematic stuff. I thought that was interesting. Obviously, I think it was the band 213, and they, from all the research I did on this band, they were only together. They were a garage band in Washington, I think. Probably getting that wrong, but they performed this one song and then they broke up. So there's not even a quality track of this particular song. So other than that, I think we mentioned like Charles Fleischer. We mentioned like a lot of the affected bits. I think I like that they credit him as Fred Krueger.
Yeah.
That was always funny. So I think that's basically all that I have. What about you?
Nope, I covered everything I want to talk about, so I'm good to
Okay.
go.
All right. Good. So, but okay, go ahead. What are your thoughts? Is this worth remembering, worth a remake?
Well, for me, I say it's worth remembering basically because of the character Freddy Krueger. I think Wes Craven created a character that, has, a place in our culture. He's definitely iconic. And he was a big part of my life as a young kid. I loved dressing up as Freddy and the whole bit. And so it is fun to go back and revisit these movies. But as far as the movie as a whole, it wasn't as well made as I remembered it being. And I know they did a remake with Jackie Earl Haley, I think, right, as Freddy Krueger. And I haven't seen that whole movie. I've seen bits and pieces of it, but what I did see, I didn't like.
Yeah,
So,
Jackie Earle Haley is friends with Johnny Depp in real life, actually.
Okay, yeah.
I think I read that.
But they made Freddy like have all this dialogue, and he's talking back and forth with the people he's going to kill. It's just weird. It's kind of like, why is he talking so much? you know?
Yeah.
But I don't know. And I know they delve more into the whole, the parents killing him in the new movie too.
Right.
But I think it's worth remembering because it's Freddy Krueger. But I don't think the filmmaking as on a whole is the greatest.
Yeah, I would. It's weird when you have movies that have been remade that we cover, because I think, how do I say this? Like I said, a lot of the filmmaking is very amateurish. When I was watching it, I thought, well, it's 1984. Maybe filmmaking at the time wasn't up to snuff, and so you have to forgive it for that. So I decided, well, let me look up and see what other movies were made in 1984. And I have movies like Amadeus or The Cotton Club from Francis Ford Coppola. I have Ghostbusters came out, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, which no matter what you think of that, it's a very, very, very well made and structured and constructed movie. You've got Once Upon a Time in America from Leone. You have A Passage to India from David Lean. Romancing the Stone came out this year. This is Spinal Tap came out in 1984, which that's more documentary, but it's the filmmaking in that one is of a piece with the film that it's trying to be.
Right.
And if you were to say, well, those aren't horror movies, they're not, obviously they're a different quality. You had Blood Simple that came out the same year.
Oh, wow.
You had the Terminator that we talked about that came out the same year. Terminator that's just like a bullet. If you're going to talk about a movie that's structured like a bullet, the Terminator is just so tightly done, and it's so intense, and it's energetic, and it shows what Cameron, like all the action stuff that he's going to pay off for the rest of his career. It's a good announcement of who James Cameron is. Yeah. So the fact that it's kind of shoddily made in some parts, it's not really an excuse. And even the budget, like you can do more. Halloween was shot for $700,000, and they spent most of their money on the Steadicam stuff to make it look elegant. So the shoddily made stuff, I can't really use that as an excuse, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's hard because to do a remake today. And we'll talk about this a little more in the outro. But if we're going to talk specifically about that Jackie Earle Haley remake, it's dull. Like there's nothing exciting or threatening or scary about it. It's just there's no atmosphere. There's no style to it. This one, at least, I can tell what they were doing and trying to strive for.
Yeah.
But I know that this movie has a strong following. So I'm not going to sit here and go and say that you people are idiots for liking this movie that sucks, because the parts that are effective. And it's just maybe me nitpicking a lot of other stuff, but I can't help it if the electronic rock score during a scary scene takes me out of the movie, especially when it cuts off at one point. Nancy runs into the house and the music just quits. There's like no fade out or anything. It's like, it's just,
Well, didn't they quit when the door slammed? I think that was
but it didn't slam. I just didn't think it worked. It didn't work loud. It didn't like slam loud enough. Again, this is just me being nitpicking. So
well, even with all this, I mean, Wes Craven still has doesn't he have the title of like the horror film master or something like that? Like, don't they give him like some kind of horror film title? Like, what did they call him? What was his title that he was given? I know it was something.
I think
it
it's
was
going
like
to be
the
just
Master of Horror or something like that, right?
Master of Horror. I think that's basically all that. And again, it's more. I don't know. It's more his ideas. I know he did Last House on the Left and Hills Have Eyes in the 70s, which added to the ickiness of like the exploitation genre and stuff like that.
You know what's funny? He did a movie called Deadly Friend, which I also saw when I was younger, and that one also creeped me out too.
Okay.
In fact, it's on my list, so maybe we'll do it later on.
Okay, just to see how it works instead.
Yeah.
So just like I said, the effective bits work. Obviously, it has a strong following. It worked well enough that it made Freddy into a pop culture icon. And so, I don't know, they could go back and they could shoot it better, but like we talked about before, they tried it and didn't work. So the first one is effective enough. I think it's worth remembering, even though, it's more of a 3-star movie than a 4-star masterpiece classic, kind of thing. It's effective, but not as effective as, say, a Halloween or a Texas Chainsaw Massacre or even Evil Dead, which they show a clip of in the movie. I just, when they showed Evil Dead, I was like, I kind of want to watch that instead. You know what I mean? Because there's more energy and style to it. So worth remembering, even though, with an asterisk next to it, worth remembering.
All right. Sounds good. Well, how about we take a break and come back and talk about our top 3 Wes Craven movies?
Okay. That sounds good. Okay.
1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. 3, 4, better lock your door.
Okay, we're back. But before we do our top 3 Wes Craven movies, we forgot to talk about Robert Englund. So we better do that because he was Freddy Krueger, and we got to talk about that.
Yeah, big misstep on our part. I feel really bad. As soon as we stopped, I was like, we didn't talk about Englund at all.
I mean, that character made his career. I mean, that's what he's known for, and he did a great job, in my opinion, as the character. So,
well, he has the makeup does a lot of it, and the lighting does a lot of it. But I think Freddy in the movie has a sinister enjoyment for the torturing that he does. When you talk to people that made the movie, it's like he could just kill you like that. He could kill you immediately, but he's toying with you. Exactly.
And that's always the question we have. Like, why doesn't he just slash her right there? Why doesn't he just stab her right now? He just wants to torture them more, or wants to see them squirm.
It's the sadistic fun of it. And I think Englund has that mean streak in him, but he also has kind of the wink in his eye. So I can, even though it's disgusting that they turned the pedophile serial murderer into the hero, the wisecracking hero of the series, you can't really hide that. It's kind of like, Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. It's like he had such a charisma and such power as an actor that you couldn't help but gravitate towards him. It's the same thing with Robert Englund. And he's very gracious and grateful that he had the part. I know that's what he's known for, but if you talk to him, I know that I love that he talks about how the makeup did the work, and when he put the glove on, it was heavy. And so he slouched his shoulder. And so whenever you see Freddy in silhouette, he's slouching like this. And he likened it to being like a gunslinger, which is cool because he's got the knives, his knife hand just ready to go. So and he thought about a lot of this stuff. I know we didn't talk either about how the sequels kind of add to his backstory, which makes him, I know he was the bastard son of 1,000 or 100 evil men or something like that, because the nun that was his mom was raped in a mental asylum repeatedly. And then I think by the final nightmare or something like that, there were these demons that were trying to keep him alive that would go into his spirit and bring him to life that way so they could keep terrorizing people. So, Englund is game for all that kind of stuff. And he I think even today, even after Freddy versus Jason, if they were to do another one, he says, I'm game. I'll be back. I love playing this character. Yeah. Which again is weird because it's a pedophile child murderer, I just think that it's weird that that's the part that kind of gets forgotten about the character. Yeah. But again, he's so good at it that, we talked about at the top of the meat of our conversation about it's just Freddy's just more interesting
Yeah.
than Michael Myers or Jason or Leatherface or that kind of thing. So anyway, I thought he hasn't really done a lot since then, but I think he's great.
Yeah, me too.
So
all right, you go first. I'm gonna let you go first this time on your top 3. So let's go ahead with your list of your top of your Wes Craven movies.
okay, all right. So we talked about him being amateurish. I think his best movie, I don't know if it's his best and most effective, but watching it again recently, it's from top to bottom, it's his most well-crafted movie. There isn't a lot of the amateurishness and and that's Red Eye. From 2005 with Rachel McAdams and Cillian Murphy, and Brian Cox shows up. You know, she's I think she's a secretary and who's got a connection to a senator. And so Cillian Murphy kind of plays this terrorist that sits next to her on a plane and kind of blackmails her and threatens her into manipulating the senator to move to a different room so they can launch a terrorist attack on him. But just from beginning to end, it's very sustained. You know, it's like it's built suspensefully, like he's nice at first, and then you realize he's sinister, and then you realize what he's doing, and it's just it's very well sustained on this plane. And comparatively, there's hardly any fat to this movie. It's just a very well constructed, and that's why I think it's not necessarily Wes Craven's best or most effective. It's just his most well made. But still, it's pretty suspenseful, and it's a pretty good show from beginning to end. And what did you think of Red Eye?
Okay, I liked it, but for some reason I didn't really like. I don't know. I don't remember it that well. I know I did see it, and I thought, is it Cillian or Cillian?
It's Cillian.
Okay,
Cillian Murphy.
I thought he was great in it, but it was something that I don't want to go revisit it. I don't think I need to for some reason. It's just on my to-do list.
Yeah, it's just a good solid movie, and it's just his best direction, I think.
Okay.
So.
Well, I'm going to stick with the Freddy series, and I'm going to go with New Nightmare. And I say New Nightmare because I really enjoy movies about movies. I've always said before, but I love it when you can break the fourth wall, or you bring characters into the real world, or you talk, or what's happening gets written, or the script gets written, and that's what happens. And I love movies that do that. And so that's why I went with New Nightmare. Not that it's the greatest movie ever made, but it was a fun movie to watch.
Yeah. Well, my number 2 is actually New Nightmare. Just because we kind of tiptoed around it. I think out of all the Nightmare movies, that's probably my favorite one. It's the one that Freddy is scariest. I like that Wes Craven kind of looked at it and said, this is like all the sequels got way, way too far away from my initial concept of what Freddy is. And so he was able to make him sinister. And it's the proto Scream. It's very meta, and it has Heather Langenkamp playing herself. It has Englund playing himself.
Yeah, that's what's so fun about it. You see the characters play themselves as well as the characters in the movie. So.
And even though Wes Craven shows up as himself and Robert Shea shows up, they're not good. Like they're not, you know what I mean? They're not believable as actors or anything like, not as good as a regular actor would be. And there's like we talked about, I'll keep bringing up the amateurishness that keeps coming back into it. Like some of the performances or some of the ideas aren't particularly well staged, but just as a whole, I liked that how fun it was that they were able to, and that's what we talked about with the franchise. It takes what was done before and it kind of twists everything and rebrands it and makes it more interesting instead of just the same old, same old. And personally, I like it better than the Screams, just because my problem with the first Scream especially, which oddly enough ties in with Shrek, is when these movies are aware of what they are, and even Frozen, when they're aware of what they are and they keep shoving in your face that they're aware of what they are, it's like, okay, I get it. You don't have to keep doing that. Like
it's okay to do that once, but then just keep doing it. You kind of go, okay, enough.
Yeah. It just comes off it thinks it's smarter than it actually is. And so it's too busy. And so like the second Scream or the second Shrek, I like those better because all that setup is out of the way and they can just have fun with the stuff that's going on. So Nightmare, it doesn't get pompous like that. New Nightmare, it has the scariness. I really, really like the idea that it's, they buried the Freddy character, but I personally think that it's the devil he's trying to manifest himself through this pop cultural icon to kind of wend his way into reality. And so at the end, when they're in the furnace in the dream and the Freddy character, it morphs into a devil creature. And so I love that idea. Some of the ideas are just so fascinating, even though like the original, they're not. And like we talked about, the filmmaking is just more mature, and it's better done, even though there's still that amateurish. So New Nightmare is my number 2 as well.
Okay. Well, my number two.
Number
this is the
three.
movie-
You're number
sorry.
three.
Oh wait,
It's late. We forgot our
what did
count.
I say first?
You said what did you say? The New Night? No, you said New Nightmare. Was that
New
your
Nightmare.
first?
Yeah, my first. Yeah, this is
So
number two.
my math is way off. It is tired. It's my math. I apologize. That's one kid in the background, right? Not two. Okay.
That's the fifth one.
That's the fifth one. All right. I only saw one though, but you're saying you have five in the house.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Sorry. Your number one was New Nightmare.
Yes.
My number two is New Nightmare. What is your number two?
My
Let's
number
just
two-
pretend that last 10 minutes just never existed.
Well, this is a movie that he didn't actually direct, and
Oh.
I'm gonna pick it because I think it's a fun movie, and also because I like this whole concept that Matt Damon and Ben Affleck did, the Project Greenlight, and this is the one they did where they picked a horror movie this time, and the movie Feast was made.
Oh, okay.
And the winner directed this movie called Feast, and Wes Craven produced it.
Okay.
So he had his hands in it, but yet it's still a fun movie. And I'm just a fan of the Project Greenlight, that whole thing. So, and it's actually the only Wes Craven movie that I own. I think we own Scream, but I'm not a big Scream fan, so I'm not going to pick one of those. But yeah, Feast. I like that movie.
Okay. I haven't actually seen it. What is Feast about?
Aliens, or they're in this bar and they're being attacked by aliens or monsters or something, and they're trying to escape.
It sounds familiar. Maybe because I remember I entered a screenplay myself in Project Greenlight, which obviously didn't get picked up. Otherwise, you'd see better posters behind me. But I think I kept tabs on it. So Feast does sound familiar. That's cool that Craven produced it.
Yep.
So I'll have to check that out. I'll add it to my list. So my number three was a movie from 1988 called The Serpent and the Rainbow.
Okay.
With Bill Pullman, Paul Winfield. Again, it's about an anthropologist who kind of gets tasked to go to Haiti and investigate like this powder or whatever that's turning people into zombies. And it's just, even though, again, there's some amateurishness to it, it's just very, I haven't been able to forget it since I saw it. There's a part where he's tortured by this police group that doesn't want the secrets to come out. And so he's strapped to a chair and they hammer a nail through his scrotum.
Yikes.
And it's one of those things you're like, oh my gosh. And then they throw him back out and into the street. But it's full of images like that. I know that it kind of maybe delves too deep into like the xenophobia that you see in a lot of movies of like fear of these foreign lands. But, it's a zombie movie that isn't a traditional zombie. It's based on a real case of this guy that was supposedly turned into a zombie. And they did that with like a systematic abuse of drugs. And they kind of conditioned him to be a mindless, I think they poured something up his nose or something like that. Anyway, so they turn him into this mindless, technically a zombie. And so it's based on that particular case. Okay. And it's just the images and the stylishness of it and just the flashes of violence and how unnerving a lot of it is. I haven't been able to forget it. But even though maybe watching it now, some of the racist stuff in it might come out a little bit more uncomfortable.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, so I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, it's pretty eerie and it's very well, even though I say it's not perfectly made, it at least creates an atmosphere of dread without making you feel dirty, I guess you could say. Okay. So Serpent and the Rainbow, my number three. Three, right? Number three? Okay, yeah. All right.
So my number three, I mentioned it in the episode, and I'm picking this one because it has always stuck with me, and I always was, it always made me just feel really scared after watching it, and that's Deadly Friend. Okay. It's about this, I want to say it's just, I don't know if it's a robot or what, but it's like this, I forget really what happens in it. All I know is it always scared me. It was always, and I couldn't go to sleep after watching this movie whenever I would watch it, and it was always on HBO all the time, so I'd seen it a lot.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen it recently. I need to watch it again to make sure this is a good pick. But for some reason, I just want to stick with that because it's something that I've always just remembered. And the feeling that it gave me has always stuck with me. And anyway, so if you haven't seen it, check it out. A Deadly Friend. It does have some of the corny, cheesy stuff. I know someone's head gets blown off at one point, and I remember like a watermelon or something. But there's some cheesy stuff in there. But for some reason, just the feeling that it gave me I was always just creeped out by it.
Was it just the story that did that to you?
Possibly. I don't really remember exactly what it was. All I know is the girl, she had like this white face and kind of like bags in her eyes all the time, and she looked like she was just really creepy looking, and she was like, I don't know. I gotta watch it again. But all I know is I really liked the way it made me feel.
Right. Well, I don't know if we mentioned this at the at the top. I don't mean to disrespect. I keep saying amateur, but I don't mean to disrespect Wes Craven because I love hearing stories about him. I love hearing interviews with him. I mean, he got his master's degree in philosophy at Johns Hopkins. He was a professor in humanities at the Clarkson School of Technology. He's very, very smart, and he's very well educated. And every time you hear people talk about him, he's I think England described him as being very erudite. He's just very knowledgeable, and he talks with authority, and he knows his subjects and stuff like that. So he's a very smart man. And when you hear him talk about all the thoughts that he puts into his movies, he's very smart and very intelligent in the way he does that. I just, sometimes maybe the way that he presents himself and the way as a filmmaker that he makes movies, it doesn't always translate that well. But I love the idea of this man. Carpenter's the same way, Argento's the same way. They're not idiots. They know what they're doing, and they have a craft. But sometimes horror is very objective. Sometimes it hits you the right way, and sometimes it doesn't. But I don't think we should take away that these are intelligent men that know exactly what they're talking about and how to present ideas to audiences.
He didn't get the title Master of Horror for nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, Wes Craven, good man. He's missed as far as the horror community goes.
Yeah. All right, so that will do it for our top 3 Wes Craven movies. Darin, I think we have a guest next time.
No, not next time. We've had to push him back a little bit. Okay. But what I wanted to do for the next episode, again, what's great about all these movies that are like nostalgia blasts, they're coming out and doing like updates of all these different movies.
Yeah.
We've got Ghostbusters Afterlife that's coming out, I think the 19th of next month. So I wanted to do a Ghostbusters movie. I didn't want to do the first one because it's too much in the public eye. There's nothing I can really add to it. I don't want to do the Lady Ghostbusters because even if I mention it, we're going to come off as misogynists if you don't like it because we're women haters, even though that's not at all the reason why that movie isn't really for me. So I wanted to do Ghostbusters 2. I know it's like one of the, it's kind of looked down on or forgotten. People don't really talk about it as much. I had a very strong negative reaction to it the first time I saw it in a theater. And that might have to do with the fact that Ghostbusters was one of my favorite movies. And then, it was very, what's the word I'm looking for? It defined me in a way. It was a very indelible movie growing up. And Ghostbusters 2, I feel differently about it now, but I'd like to go back and revisit it and kind of get a full picture of it.
I think I mentioned in our first episode that Ghostbusters 2 was the best movie ever made.
So, all right, spoiler alert, I guess. All right, so yeah, Ghostbusters 2, 1989, directed by Ivan Reitman, with all those greats: Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, the late great Harold Ramis, Rick Moranis. So it'd be fantastic to talk about that one.
All right, that sounds good. We'll do that next time. And for NostalgiaCast, I am Jonny Craddock.
And I'm Darin Lundberg.
We'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.